Welcome to Politi-Talk Centered, where we invite you to have the conversation. I'm your host, Sandman. My co-host, Holland, is running a little bit late, but he'll be with us later. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss the events that transpired in Kenosha, as well as gun safety and best practices. With us today is guest starring, returning from our first episode, Mr. Marty Katz, who is a retired sergeant with the Broward Sheriff's Office in Fort Lauderdale. He's also the owner and chief instructor of Crime Wave Solutions and author of the book Pass the Uniform. Joining us for the first time as well is Eric Galloway, who's the founder and owner of Galloway Precision and is a well-known or infamous cigar and whiskey aficionado.
Thank you.
Yep. So, to kind of start this off, and to give everybody a baseline context, everything that's going on in Kenosha kind of sparked off with a police shooting that involved a Jacob S. Blake. He was resisting arrest, tried to get into his vehicle, and at that point, the officers fired upon him. He's survived, but is currently paralyzed from the waist down. They don't know if that's going to be permanent, but he's currently recovering from that. And just kind of from your perspective, Marty, I don't know how much of it you've seen into it, but what's kind of your take on how that was handled?
Well, there's a couple points that come up. One, there is a picture of something in his hand as he walks towards the car. I don't know what precipitated this whole thing and why they tased him in the first place. There are 3 officers. When he went to the car, he reached in. A couple things come to mind. One, tactical officers might have stepped back and spoken to him from a distance, if they could. Second, you don't reach forward. We had an officer killed for reaching forward. He reached in to grab the guy, and the guy pulled a gun and shot him above the vest about 7 times. So, you learn from those mistakes. Firing 7 times, I can understand the fact that you're using a semi-automatic handgun, and once you fire the first one, if it is that, if it was a Glock kind of weapon, then I have a problem with 7 shots because each one is a double action. There's a lot of time between it. But if it was like a SIG or something like that, after the first round, it's all single action, sometimes that does happen. So I don't know anything more than what the media said, so I can't make any real clear-cut assessment until I know more of what led up to it, what was said between the two, and the indication of potential for violence. So I'm kind of neutral at the moment.
I got you. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that's been kind of a problem in a lot of these is the media and people are so quick to kind of jump the gun on things before we know the full story. And it's just kind of crazy. Holland, I see you finally made it in. Awesome. Welcome. So with us, we got Mr. Marty Katz. He's joined us, as well as Mr. Eric Galloway. So they're going to be discussing with us. So that is what basically transpired all this. And that rolls us into who is Kyle Rittenhouse, which is what this episode kind of revolves around. So a little background on him. He describes himself as a militia member. However, none of the groups have claimed him, which I honestly don't blame them. There's so much attention and heat right now revolving around him that it would kind of be suicidal for any group to claim him. So I could understand that. He is a certified EMT, which I believe he got that through his cadet program he does with the Antioch Fire Department. And he also is with the cadet program with the Grays Lake Police Department, which they do ride-alongs and weapons handling and training and stuff like that. The thing that stands out the most to me was the weapon that he used was a friend's and not his. I haven't been able to 100% confirm that, but that was listed as coming from a Twitter post from one of his friends. So that I thought was a little bit interesting. So
18.
It kind of looks like. Go ahead.
So either way, he's under 18, so legally he can't own a firearm.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I covered too. But because and it's one thing like if he took it from his parents, or it's like it's his hunting rifle that his parents own. I just feel like there's a lot more kind of maliciousness, maybe not intent, but just malicious action in using something that wasn't related to what his family would have access to.
Yeah, no legal guardian present for the self.
I also have a question with, if he was a police cadet, having trained police cadets, he would have known that what he was about to embark on was strictly prohibited. They would have trained him as, you watch the police, but you also learn the separation between civilian and police. And he kind of overstepped his bounds, I think.
And to like kind of to play in his shoes a little bit, I could see it being he's in this lineup working with law enforcement and the fire department. He obviously has some kind of interest in helping the community and being a protector of the community. And when you're young like that, the whole world's your oyster. You feel like you can do anything just about.
Yeah,
and
you're
I could see that kind of feeling it. Yeah. But it definitely doesn't justify it or make it right. So with his intentions, when he did arrive over there, a reporter asked him if his role was non-lethal or not, in which his reply while cradling his weapon said, "We don't have non-lethal." And so like I feel like that if that is used in the prosecution, that's going to be kind of a shot in his foot, because right then and there he's already kind of showing that we didn't come here with non-lethal weapons to defend ourselves. So I feel like that could be used against him.
It will, without a doubt. Shows intent.
Wouldn't it be, Marty, wouldn't you say that they're going to look at it as like a malicious intent?
Oh, without a doubt. That I got more comments later about some other things, but he's setting the groundwork. In fact, he's wearing rubber gloves. You're going to say, well, he wanted his fingerprints on anything. So there's going to build a lot based on how he was from the get-go. He's in some serious legal problems. Forget about civil problems, but just criminal problems. Start with those.
Yeah. And one other thing too, he told the Daily Caller that he was in Kenosha because people are getting injured and our job is to protect businesses. And that's all good and said. It would have been better if he had said people.
Or the community in general.
Yeah.
What businesses of his? Was he hired, or did he just take it upon himself to put himself in harm's way?
I don't think there was, and that's one thing that I wasn't able to find much information on. There was a group, he was with a group of people at the car dealership that they were guarding. I don't know what his affiliation with those other people were, or how he got roped into that or joined into that. There's really very little information right now. And the other weird thing about it is where they were guarding or protecting that property and where this event transpired were two different places. He relocated to another location, and that's when this stuff happened. So there's so many questions I have that are really hard to answer right now, revolving around that. And obviously, like we kind of talked about his, his passion with law enforcement stuff. His social media is pretty much all Blue Lives Matter and pro police and stuff. So he definitely has a mindset there. There's if you were to kind of profile him, there's obviously this mindset that he has that's driving him. And even maybe kind of having a tunnel vision of sorts.
He would not be hired by a police department after a psychological with that much pro-police philosophy at such an early age. You know, it just wouldn't. I ran recruitment for the largest sheriff's office in the country, and he would have been flagged with that kind of enthusiasm, and especially now with the able to research social media. I don't think he would have made it past the psychological.
And what's kind of the mindset behind that as far as the over infatuation?
It's the wannabe thing where somehow you got put in your brain about law enforcement being a certain way. Maybe it's from movies, from books, from TV, but it's not what it really is. It's a glorified wannabe kind of thing, like a person wants to be, a SEAL or a Delta Force. They want to go for that. And no one gets picked with that kind of enthusiasm. It's a job still, even though it's a calling, it's a job. And he might have been too over anxious.
Gotcha.
Safe to say.
And that might go ahead.
His dismissal from the selection process for the Marine Corps too. That over enthusiasm. That would definitely be a giant red flag if that was, like you said, if they were trolling through social media. I mean, that's a pretty big fingerprint most people have in it, anymore, and it's a resource people use a lot for, for selecting employees and the evaluation process based on that. And like nowadays too, for research for criminal processing and civil processing.
And I can even say from experience, even with people that are already in the military, it's become a lot more oversight on social media profiles and stuff. Even for the simple fact of OPSEC, making sure people aren't saying things that they shouldn't be for national security reasons even. So it's definitely something that they're looking at more. So moving forward into it, the chain of events that kind of led into all this. So, and I don't think I put this in the notes, but where he lives and this location is about 20 miles. So for some people, that's shorter than some people's commutes. And one thing that kind of annoyed me was the constant usage of the term cross state lines when describing this whole thing and not giving all the information. It's like, yes, he did cross state lines, and that is going to be a huge problem for him with the legalities. It makes it a lot worse. But for the context of the situation of him, he's not coming from another state or 3 states over, looking to do something. He's in his tri-state area.
Here's a point though. I'm going to interrupt you. Years ago, New York State had an 18-year-old drinking age limit. New Jersey, it was 21. If someone from New Jersey was underage, under 21, and went over there, they were held because you did not live there. It's a tricky spot, a real tricky spot. State lines are there for a reason. We are 50 individual countries basically when it comes to certain laws, like driver's license, taxing, firearms. If you go down to New Jersey with a permit from here where I live, and you have hollow point bullets, even as an ex-police officer, I could be in trouble. But I can have it here, high capacity magazines. So you have to realize that one of the things that's going to happen is they're going to pay strict attention to that once he steps over that state line. I know everything you're saying. It's only 20 miles away. It's like it shouldn't matter, but they're going to look at that when it comes to a charging document. They're going to look at that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And definitely, I'm not saying that the prosecution stuff that it should matter. It absolutely does matter. More so, just the perception of him and what he was doing. So, with that, starting at the earlier in the day, he was seen helping administrating first aid. Early on in the day, they were cleaning up graffiti and trash around different businesses.
He had
the bulk of the day,
that time?
He had the rifle the entire time.
All right. Well, I don't know if you need a rifle to clean up trash or to wash graffiti off a building. That's kind of overkill, I would think.
A little bit.
Scare the graffiti.
And for the bulk of the day, they were guarding a business with other armed individuals. Later on in the evening, he left that site and was heading to another. And at some point, and then I haven't had a chance to watch I forgot the news agency that did it, but they basically took all the videos and social media posts and they made this like fluid, every angle shot of everything that happened. And I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I haven't seen the very beginning, so I'm not sure exactly what led into the altercation starting. But essentially, Rosenbaum gives chase to Rittenhouse, and he's seen throwing an object. It's been described as a plastic bag of some sort. I don't know what was in it. Could have been anything. But he throws it, and as they approach a vehicle, there's a gunshot that can be heard that is in the direction of behind Rittenhouse as he's running. So he doesn't know what's happened. All he knows is that he's heard a gunshot. At this point, he turns around and faces the direction that the gunshot came from. As when he does that, obviously he's not moving as fast anymore. Rosenbaum gets up to him, and I haven't seen the video. I've heard that he was fighting him for the rifle. I've heard all other accounts where he was just getting up to him. So once again, that's something I'm going to watch the video for to confirm. But once Rittenhouse gets up to him, and allegedly attempts to take his weapon, 4 shots can be heard that are fired from Rittenhouse's rifle. And this, I believe one of them was a headshot, and it killed him. Rittenhouse then begins to flee that scene because a mob is basically coming up on him. They're yelling, "Get him, get that dude, hey, shot him, beat him up." So it's illegal to flee a scene of a crime. However, if your life is potentially in danger, you need to be able to get to a safe place. And I think one thing that helps him is that as he's fleeing that location, presumably he calls somebody. Presumably, I'm thinking it was 911 because he can be heard, "I just killed someone." So he was law-abiding in that sense that as soon as that happened, he did contact the authorities. As he's running from there, he's pursued by the mob and trips and falls to the ground. At that point, a majority of the mob begins to surround him. And this is when Anthony Hubbard takes a swing at Rittenhouse's head with a skateboard. Once Rittenhouse regains control of his weapon and gets out of the daze, I guess, he shoots Hubbard. And at that point, Gage Grusketz approaches him. He's brandishing a handgun. I've seen accounts that describe it as a Glock. He takes aim at the teenager, and then that is when Rittenhouse fires around into his shoulder. So, and then after that, after he gets away from that, the police are now coming in. The riot squad's coming in. He has his hands up. His weapon is off to his side. Hands are up. He's walking slowly to the police until one of the cruisers finally stopped by him and they dealt with him. So he surrendered himself up. Through all of this, from the short clips I have seen and from the written accounts that I've read, all 3 of those I feel like were in self-defense. And this is kind of going to be what really boils down to what he's charged with. And what's your guys' thought on that, Marty?
All right. First of all, he's a 17-year-old with a gun, a semi-automatic weapon, untrained, should not be there. That's first of all. Second, even as a police officer, if I put myself in harm's way, like a car's coming at me, I step in front of the car and shoot and kill the driver. Yes, the guy's coming at me with a weapon, but I put myself in harm's way. So they're going to look at that aspect of it, that he shouldn't have been there and he was brandishing a weapon. They're also going to say that after he shot the first person, self-defense or not, the second individual said that he was trying to stop a guy that he just witnessed that he shot. So he's going to say that he was trying to do the right thing as well. So it's going to be a he said thing, and with lawyers fighting. It all comes back from the fruit of the poisonous tree. Once he started an illegal act, it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough to show that a 17-year-old who he's 17, he's not an adult, has a high-powered weapon, which they're going to say a high-powered weapon. We all know a weapon's a weapon. Doesn't matter if it's high power.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, weapons don't kill, people kill. They're going to say that he's a 17-year-old kid that was glorified into this thing with a gun, whatever it be, white supremacy, whatever reason they're going to attach to it, and he put himself in harm's way. He didn't know how to handle himself in a situation. He fired 4 rounds at someone, killing them, ran away because he saw the crowd coming, turned and engaged again. The only one that he may have a chance with is if the guy did, in fact, the picture of the guy had, it did look like a Glock. You know, that might be an element where he did a stand your ground situation. But up until then, he's using deadly force in a situation that he put himself in. So he might have a real problem with that. Plus, you have also the O.J. Simpson thing. You have the civil thing now. Even if he's found not guilty criminally, he could be him and his parents are going to be sued civilly. Whoever brought him to there, whoever okayed him to be part of whatever group they are, and they'll find out who it is, they're going to be held liable too. Maybe criminally, definitely civilly. This started a tsunami of problems that's only going to get worse, and his life is basically over. It's one thing to have the court of public opinion. We have a discussion, and we discuss it, and we talk about it. But once you get inside a courtroom, that's a sterile, after the fact, where everyone's in nice jackets and ties, and everyone gets to say their case and use their special thesaurus to make great words. He's going to have a real hard time with the civil and criminal aspect of this, even if it was self-defense. Look what happened to George Zimmerman with self-defense. Everything that happened to him afterwards. This is a horrible thing, and whoever brought a 17-year-old kid and put him there in harm's way, that was definitely wrong from the start.
Whoever brought him and armed him further, you know what I'm saying? Not only did they bring him, they armed him.
Yes.
So, I will say this. I agree 100% with Marty. I've watched the uncut 3 videos that show it from start to beginning. At the very first video, you can see Rosa, what's his name? The first one that he shoots in the head.
Rosenbaum.
Rosenbaum. You see him key in on him. For whatever reason, he is locked in on him already. And I don't know what happened, of course, prior to when the video cuts on. He is already all over him, ignoring the other armed men around him. And it's like he is keyed in, locked in on him like a wolf. I have no idea why.
Like something was said or
or he's just going after the youngest looking one there that only has a rifle. The other guys are kitted up, and most of them are bigger guys. So I'm thinking maybe he keyed in on the younger guy, the little guy, the less armed guy. But you see them exchanging words. He's not really agging on Rosenbaum. This guy is just on him, and there's people trying to get him to chill out and back off, and he's blowing them off, wanting in on this kid. The next video cuts into he's chasing him. They run into each other. You hear a pop, and only he gets up. The other dude's down. You see him get on his phone. 2 or 3 people run into the camera view. They ignore him, and he's on the phone. You can hear him explaining what he's done. And then you can't hear, of course, what the audio is from the other side of the phone. But you see him start walking away, and then he takes off at a run. The next video cuts in, and you see him running. He falls and gets attacked, and that's when the other gunfight exchange happens. In the video, it looks to me like the guy with the handgun, regardless of what brand it is, but the handgun itself, he does get shot off, and he misses. And that's when you see the boom, and his arm liquefies. My guess is it wasn't actually a hit from the round. It was more the backwash from the muzzle. It was literally like touching his arm. Pretty devastating from any rifle, really. It's centerfire rifle. So that's seeing all this take place. You know, like Marty said, you might have some sort of grounds, you know, that he was trying to defend himself, but ultimately he was a minor that was armed illegally, left without guardianship in this environment. You know, so I have to agree 100% with Marty. The civil end of this may be worse than the criminal end of it.
Yeah,
it's a you know, just a messy situation no matter how you cut it, because of like the initial just, F up, it just snowballs out of control. And that's the result. I mean, like you could take different mindsets and different looks, when he makes a bolt for it to get to the police officers that are apparently on the other end of the phone telling him to come to us. Yeah, I get it. The kid's nervous. Again, this is a child in a lot of aspects. And he's not got the confidence. He's dumped adrenaline. He's panicky because he just shot somebody in the head with a rifle and a whole people around. So when he runs like a scared rabbit, all these retards that were there to destroy stuff key in on that. And that's when you start hearing them shout, get him, so you see him running. But what happens?
Yeah, it's mob mentality.
Yeah, you get a rabbit run, and the coyotes chase the rabbit even worse because now the rabbit's running. We exchanged this conversation in the shop the other day. We're watching a video, and basic tactics with it. You're armed, you have a rifle, you're trying to make an egress. You go slow, you work your corners, you work your field of vision, check your six. These are basic tactics. He did not know. He had not been trained. He was not able to prevent any of these. And as a result, he's at a dead run, trips and falls, and gets into another fight that results in an additional death and a severe injury that he's going to ultimately be responsible for. And like Marty said, even his parents are going to get drugged into it because he was a minor.
Yep. Holland, anything you want to add?
Not really. I mean, everyone's been pretty on point. Mainly listening.
So moving into the legality side. So right now, from what I read up on, he's on Thursday he was charged with 6 counts, including 2 homicide charges, a criminal complaint accusing him of killing Rosenbaum and Huber amid the unrest, and he was charged with first-degree reckless homicide, first-degree intentional homicide, and attempted first-degree intentional homicide, as well as 2 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, all while using a deadly weapon. And part of that also is, I think when he shot the first individual, there was a reporter there with him in that area, is what I read. I don't know if you can confirm that from the videos you saw, Eric, but he apparently was within the area of fire, and thus, his life was being endangered by the event. I don't know if you saw any of the bystanders that were kind of in the way.
In the video that I saw, that kind of covered that part of it that they showed, it was uncut, and anybody else really in the frames until after he is up on the phone, kind of almost like at a pace, pacing back and forth because he's panicking. And, he's on the phone. The other dude's just laying there at this point. And you see several other people run in. But up until that point, because once you see the video, the kid's making a bolt for it. And he more or less just kind of screws up and runs into a wall, the side of a building and a car. And at that point, it's either get tackled or turn and engage. And I think he makes that decision to turn and engage a little too late watching the video because he gets, slammed into at that point. So you've got not even a knockdown, drag out fight. You've just got a knockdown, So I don't recall seeing anybody in the immediate frame of the video. It doesn't mean they weren't somewhere off camera, obviously, but the guy that's running the camera that's talking is actively pursuing this, I guess is a safe word to say.
Yeah. And into Wisconsin's laws. Wisconsin allows gun owners to openly carry in public. However, a person under the age of 18 cannot legally possess or carry a firearm unless that person is hunting or target practicing with an adult or they are in the military. By illegally bringing a firearm to Wisconsin and openly carrying it, Kyle Rittenhouse committed a Class A misdemeanor. Even under Illinois' code, he is not of legal age to carry an AR-15.
You're bringing a gun to a hostile environment when you're not a certified police officer. You're going to have a hard time justifying that. I don't care what they talk about, militia or your self-defense. You don't live there. You have no business being there. So right from the start, you really can't build a case because all they come back to will be the same thing. If I do a search and it's illegal, no matter what I find, it's illegal. No matter how good it is, no matter how solid it is, and even if you admit it, it's inadmissible. So the moment he crossed state lines, being a juvenile with a weapon, into a hostile environment that he had no business being in, regardless of what anyone says now, you can always say something afterwards, he started this path. So whatever happened falls on his shoulders. Yes, he did a lot of things in self-defense. He lost his marbles totally because he's a young kid, doesn't know how to handle it. And everything you said about guarding his six and looking around and tactics, he didn't have any of that.
Zero.
And so it happened from the moment he got out of that car in that area. The clock was ticking for this. And that's what they're going to say. And there's no way you're going to beat that with a jury. No way you're going to beat that with civilians in a civil trial. It's not going to happen because you don't have to show, all you have to do is show predominance of guilt in a civil trial, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Just 51% that he was wrong, and you're done. So he definitely, whoever put in his brain that he can do this should be held accountable.
I agree.
They lit a fuse and they just walked away from it.
If it
let
was
it go.
Like militia too, you would think that they would be that thought process. Like, we don't want this to backfire on us. Let's bring the kid in, but let's stick him with a med pack. He's a trained EMT, and let's
Exactly.
buddy him up.
You're 100% right.
Yeah, battle him up with a battle buddy that is armed and is legit. It's legal to be armed because he's an adult, and let that guy be, his battle buddy at that point, right? I mean, we don't arm the kid, but we let him knock down the graffiti with some scrub brushes, tend to injuries with an EMT kit. That would have been a reasonable use of a minor that is dying to help.
100% right. And wait till you hear the lawsuit against the police department that supposedly trained him as a cadet.
Yes.
You're going to have far-reaching tentacles that's going to mess up a lot of people that are just on the perimeter of it.
Right.
The police department's website, the page that they had all that information for that program on, they removed because of this event.
You can do that, but guess what?
Still falls back on them.
You're done.
Yeah.
No, it's as a supervisor, I was responsible for everyone on the road, whether I was there or not. If I signed off on something, I should have been there. I should have been there, or I should have known. So all these people, when you get in a court of law, which is a sterile atmosphere where cooler heads prevail, they start looking over the law. It's going to be a long way from that street that night.
Yep.
And it's going to really, this is going to ruin a lot of people's lives and careers by putting this kid out there.
I guess, like, my question on the subject of everything. So the guy who got shot, when would that had the gun or whatever? My question is, why are no charges being pressed against him since he's got a domestic violence charge and he was carrying a gun?
A convicted felon with a handgun. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And then the guy who got shot in the head, I mean, he was definitely convicted of a class 3. What was it?
Just because you did something wrong in your past doesn't hold today. I can't bring into court someone's past in a case until it comes time for sentencing. So I can't say because you did a burglary yesterday, you did a burglary today. But if you get convicted of both, I could say that you've done 2 burglaries. So using the guy's past is just a media thing. It's a way to stroke the fire.
The kid in the case at all, considering that he's a minor and the other dude is already a convicted, pedophile, pretty much.
It's not going to hold water because he didn't know that ahead of time. But the fact that the guy had domestic violence and had a firearm, that should be a charge, whether he's a victim or not. Victims can commit crimes. Victims can be arrested too. Even if he's a victim of self-defense, where he was shot erroneously, he had a gun and he was not supposed to have a gun. So he could be charged with that and should be charged. I blame the police department for not getting on top of this right away. Like I've always said, reach out and be reachable. Tell them exactly what went on, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Tell them the facts right then and stop the nonsense that causes riots. This guy's arrested because he used domestic violence. He had a gun. Case closed. I don't care he got shot. That's another thing. That's a whole nother ball game. We'll address that as well. But he's going to jail. He's going to be handcuffed in bed while he awaits because he's a convicted felon with a handgun, and that's against the law. So the police screwed up on that, based on what I can hear on the news.
Yeah, I saw one report that said he'd already been released from the hospital.
No, he should have been released and bail.
Yeah, I was like, wait, this guy's a convicted felon with a handgun that has been in a gunfight. That's kind of a bunch of red flags. The cops are definitely going to be there. It's a gunshot wound. They get called when that, regardless.
Yeah, you look at the picture. He's holding a gun. That's prima facie evidence right there. He's done. That's it. Case closed. Yeah. He should have been arrested, and maybe he wasn't arrested because if he's arrested, maybe the state will have to pick up the bill for his hospital stay. So maybe when he gets released, they arrest him. We've done that before too. If it's going to be something serious, you don't want to pick up the bill for something you didn't do. So knowing the guy's not going to go anywhere, there's going to be charges pending. The minute he walks out of the hospital with a okay release, you put the cuffs on because now you can take him and it doesn't have to pay the hospital bill. So that could be something they're working too.
And with that too, absolutely, a person's past has no legal right as far as how we treat them in the present with these kind of matters. If a person's murdered, it doesn't matter if they were a convicted felon before. Murder is murder. But with that said, these guys, all of them have rap sheets behind them, and we're doing these things, and I think it's a disservice because like people like this kid that they don't understand the full grasp of everything that's going on. And you have this kind of vigilante fantasy in your mind that you're going to go and make a difference and help people, but people like this are who you can run into in these situations, and people don't think about, they don't understand that. And people with these kind of backgrounds where it's repetitive, they're constantly going down that path. They don't care about your well-being. They don't care about what happens after the fact. And that's going to be a huge problem for people that want to do good and right things, but don't have a grasp on reality.
Right. But unfortunately, again, it becomes a sterile atmosphere when you look at this legally. All that stuff is definitely used when you make your decision, and when your thought process of this guy is a bad guy, he's good at what he does, he's not a good person, he's going to hurt me. That all comes in your mind. But when you get in the court, unless that is a direct relationship to what you did, it doesn't have a bearing. And that's a sad part, because this kid, because he wasn't smart, he was 17, he didn't know any better. He's almost going to become a sacrificial lamb on this one. He's done. He's toast. Any way you look at it, in my view.
And kind of wrapping up into what's kind of igniting this, a lot of media sites are still, calling these protests. They're really fronting that protest, and they're not. In my eyes, they're not covering it honestly. Some places push it too far one way, others push it too far the other. Nobody's kind of just meeting in the middle and being like, hey, this is what's happening. And then, other states, I don't know about this area, but, there's some states where police are literally being ordered to stand down in some instances. And this is creating an environment where, people that are right on that edge of vigilantism are now, kind of stepping up because they feel like, they have to. And it's, it's just this cocktail that's finally come together with all the perfect ingredients for this perfect storm of bad decisions, really. And with what we're saying, this was definitely absolutely not the best or right thing to do in the kids' decision making. But at the same time, when you break down the psychology of everything that's going on and the circumstances, it's kind of becoming expected. Like you can see it coming.
I agree. I mean, as a police officer, we don't lose ground. it's our job to hold the ground and use whatever resources we can to make sure that laws are not broken. You can protest all you want, but the moment it turns violent, the moment you throw the first brick, it's over. It's done. And you have to go, and if you don't establish it, you can't give them a free area to do something. You can do your free area until you do violence. But once you break the law, it's over. We have free speech, but we don't have free violence.
Yeah.
So you could, I was part of field force. I was on SWAT, and we had riots in Miami. And once the word was given, that's it. You don't lose a precinct like they did in Portland or whatever. You don't do this. This is police commanders that are from the same group of kids that say when the music stops, everyone gets a chair, like musical chairs. It's the same mindset. You can't do that. You're the law. You're what the citizen needs to protect them, because they don't have the gun, they don't have the resources, they don't have the manpower. So when the police don't do it, yes, this is going to make rise to kids like this. So yeah, this is a self-feeding cancer, no doubt about it. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of victims from this. A lot of people get hurt. This kid's going to be one of them. But at the end of the day, it's the police that did not do what they were supposed to do. I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to do the unnecessary thing. Sometimes you do the bad guy. Sometimes you have to actually enforce the law. And to do that, sometimes people get hurt. Yeah. You take someone in custody. You don't have to fight me, but if you fight me, you're going to lose. It's that simple. It's that simple. You're not going to win. You and your friends are all going to jail via the hospital. End of story. Because the next person that attacks a cop who didn't do what he's supposed to do is going to get hurt. That cop's going to get hurt. So I blame the police in that city for not enforcing the law, reaching out for mutual aid, getting up and showing this is our town. You don't break the law. We don't care who the president is. We don't care what your politics are. We care about one thing, the law. We don't make it. We just enforce it.
Yep.
And what they did was they did not enforce it. I'm pro-police, but I'm not pro-stupid police. And that was wrong. Totally wrong. That gave rise to a 17-year-old kid that thought it would be okay to fill the gap that the cops weren't doing. So yeah, there's a problem there, and that's going to be fought both cases. Unfortunately, there's 2 dead, 1 wounded, and a kid that's going to go through some problems, and a bunch of people are going to be sued because the police did not enforce the law. Sorry for going crazy like that, but that's how I feel.
You're good. Eric, did you have any follow-up?
I agree. That the law enforcement fell through on that one, and it's given somebody maybe frustration. Maybe that's what some of his actions were based on, was his frustration of seeing things, fall apart in that sense, and nobody enforcing the law. But that's a failure on the law enforcement. Their job is to protect and uphold the law in their community, and by not doing that, now you have, unfortunately, in this case, outsiders of the community coming in, just like. On the flip side, you're seeing the same thing that happened here in Asheville last night. You had a bunch of so-called protesters that were carted in to these, so you're seeing kind of maybe a mirror image of this starting on the different side.
Why aren't the cops in the crowd, plain clothes, seeing what's being done? This should never get to the point where it is. This is poor policing. It's real easy to do good policing. You just do what you're supposed to do. You need bosses that aren't afraid to turn around and say to the lieutenant, I want the street cleared. Have a nice day. I'm getting a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And
go clear the street. That's it. And you know something? Once you do that a couple times, it won't happen again. But unfortunately, it's like something's been lost from this generation of law enforcement through the academy, through the training, for the feel good, for everyone gets a trophy kind of mindset. You have to, if you're not up for the job, you're not physically fit, get out of the job. It's something you have to be. You have to be able to catch Jesse Owens every time he runs from a stolen car. You got to be in shape to be a policeman. You're worthless. You are totally worthless. And I don't believe that all cops are good or all cops are bad. They're all human, but you have to have some kind of pride in what you do and go do it. And the bosses have to sit there and say, "This is why I did this." There's a sheriff in Florida that says, why we shot him 85 times? That's all the bullets we had. No, he also said that he had a press conference next to the dead body. say, this is what happens when you attack my officers. You die. That may sound bad, but we asked him to put his gun down. He didn't, so we killed him. Case closed. We charge him with the death, even though he's dead. We'll go through the process. He's handcuffed. He's underneath this yellow tarp right here. But that's what happens when you violate the law. You take deadly force against me, you're going to lose. Now, that philosophy, when I write for Police One and I try to teach police, it's not getting through anymore. The bosses don't want to hear it. They want to hear it's kinder and gentler. And this is what you get. You get a 17-year-old with a gun that's going to go out and think he could save the world because he was fed some information. And that's the problem.
I have a friend who is a law enforcement locally here, and he was telling me that he had 60 hours of gender identity interaction training last year. 60 hours. But he had 2 hours of actual combatives training for the entire year. I think that sort of sends a message that they want you more concerned about hurting someone's feelings than protecting yourself and the community that you serve. And that's something we're seeing on some of these departments now. Like you said, the kinder, gentler version.
I'm glad I'm retired.
I think it goes back into the appeasing crocodiles kind of thing. You know, you give a finger, they're going to start taking the hand. And then once they find out that they can take the hand, they're going to start taking your arm. And until you finally slap yourself some sense and pull back and stop them, they're not going to stop.
Nope. You're 100% right. And you can see it happening across the country.
So getting into the real bulk of what I wanted to outline is gun safety with minors, and kind of, taking who the responsibility of the parents, and even just adults around, him, the adults that were around him when they were there. They have a certain level of responsibility, even though they might not be related to him or necessarily know him. If he's there by himself and you're a law-abiding adult, you need to be concerned for his actions because it might come back on you. So like right off the bat, like general best practices, weapon storage. I feel like this is a good fundamental starting point for any gun owner that either has kids or, children are in the vicinity that could get access. What is some good kind of weapon storage and weapon posture maintenance that's good around minors?
Well, first, okay, go ahead.
I know here at the shop, like I have 2 children. They're both small. They've been around firearms since they were little, and they've both been, they've been raised around it because of the manufacturing of parts and the gunsmithing and competition shooting and tactical training and stuff like that I do bleeds over into my household. So any firearms that aren't secured in a locked environment are on my person or on my wife's person. And when they're not, they're disarmed and stored in pieces for the next day inside our room at night without the children not there or access. And that keeps things going. In the shop, we have test pistols out for testing parts and stuff like that. There's no ammunition left with them in magazines or anything like that to prevent prying eyes or fingers if, kids are in the shop, hopefully not unattended. But if they were, they would make it a very low risk. But, my children also know that they're when they're at the house and they have friends over, zero tolerance, that the kids are not to be asking to touch any of this stuff or play with any of this stuff. If they have any questions, they're to, come to mom or dad, not, I'll show you, that sort of. That's been pressed into mind. But again, they've been raised in the industry environment where this is normal to see these things daily and interact with them.
See a gun, tell someone about it. They should never touch it.
Yep.
No matter what. They should look at it like it's a hot stove. But curiosity, kids are curious. They're going to find out that it's not a hot stove and they can pick it up and do something with it. So you're 100% right. If you can train someone how to avoid killing themselves or their friends, that's real important. Gun safety, no finger on the trigger, barrel don't point anywhere. You could train someone like that not to fear the weapon, but to understand it, that's good, or to avoid it. But if it's not going to, it can't be just laying around. It's like, it's too easy. And that's why they have laws. So you have to have it locked up. You have to have it. He's 100% right. If it's not on his person, it's secured another way. That's it. It's that simple. And if everyone did that, it would have a domino effect, and it wouldn't be this problem. Yeah. But they don't.
You know, we live in a society where people don't follow those laws, because I've come across friends who, you know, conceal carry like I do, and they'll be the first person to lay their fully loaded handgun right next to their child and pick their child up. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect utopia, so we do have people that don't have common sense at all.
Yeah. I think, you know, it was about 15 years ago that I had a conversation with Gabe Suarez, and he said something that stuck with me, because when he mentioned it, it was kind of like, moment. And he was saying, in regards to his children are older than mine, but he was saying that he's treated firearms like he would porn, you know, and I kind of was taken back, and I thought, well, where is he going with this? He goes, if you act fruity and try to hide it, like when you get caught looking at porn, kids are going to want to know what it is. He's like, so if you have a gun and they see you with it and you act fruity and try to hide it, they're really going to want to know what it is.
Good point.
You present it. Do you present porn to your children? Absolutely not. That's not appropriate, because they're not ready for that. Firearms are tools. If you have a tool, you explain how that tool works. You don't hide that tool. You don't hide the hand. You don't hide the pliers. You explain how it works, and you maintain control of it. And,
take the mysticism out of it.
I'm sorry?
No, take the fantasy, the mysticism out of the gun.
Yes, exactly. You know, and just what he said was kind of odd, but it made complete sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's I don't know if you're kind of familiar with it. In the Buddhist faith, there's this series of understanding in their faith, and the first one is obedience through fear. And I feel like that kind of applies to, you know, guns are a scary thing, and a lot of people are scared of guns. And I think that's a good starting point. If you're afraid of it, that means you respect it to some extent. And from there, you can get into more understanding of the weapon. And as you learn more about it and how to properly hold it, use it, respect it, what to do, not to do, you know, that fear fades. And, you know, the respect always stays there, but the fear fades and is replaced with knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, that's a reasonable analogy, I think.
Yeah. Fire a gun. Let them see what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Let them feel the kick. You know? There's ways to train.
And then the other thing too, we kind of covered, you know, teaching kids to respect the weapon. But another thing too is values, ethics, and morals. You can teach somebody to be extremely respectful of a weapon, to, you know, the textbook poster child of common sense gun safety. But if they do not have good values, they do not have good ethics or morals, and, you know, they're a bad person on the inside, that doesn't matter, and they're going to do bad things with this tool that they now have.
Also peer pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's another really important thing for you know, parents with firearms and children to do, which you should be doing this anyway with your kids. You should be instilling good values, ethics, and morals in them. But, you know, to make sure that they have a sound mental foundation, and especially to respect life, is a huge thing for me.
Have you ever heard of Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman?
I have not.
He wrote the book On Killing. He's a Ranger Army psychologist. And he's usually called out whenever there's a child shooting. And he talked about one in Arkansas where a kid stole a 8-shot revolver 22. The kid fired 2 rounds in the ground, and the next day he hit the fire alarm at his school because he knew which way the kids would come out. And at 35 feet, he had like 5 headshots. The reason he got that good was because he did video games. And he knew that if he shot him and pushed the button, the kids would pop up again. And Dave Grossman does tremendous work. Wrote a book called On Killing about children with guns, and his classes are incredible. It's called the Bulletproof Mindset. It's an awesome thing where you look at what's going through a child's thing because of video games. Although video games aren't maybe not as popular as they were maybe 10, 15 years ago, but the concept was there that they die, they pop up on TV, someone gets shot, and they're okay, or they don't do any paperwork. It's all this fantasy wrapped up in this gun culture, and that you have to look at the psychology behind it. And if the parents don't have that, it's going to be a little problem because they're going to teach. I don't want someone to come to me that's a policeman whose grandfather taught him how to shoot. I want them to come to me with a police officer that taught him how to shoot. So, there's different levels here. I'm just saying that everything you said so far is 100% right. It's such a broad field that we have to address to get the children to understand that this is deadly, that there is no, makeup or
respawn.
Right. There's no, you push a button and reset. There's no, that, and maybe a 17-year-old kid just didn't have that sense in his mind. Who knows what went through his mind? In fact, probably nothing went through his mind the moment he was pushed into tunnel vision and tunnel hearing. What happened? Yeah. So he could have had all the best practices in the world. He could have had it. But the moment his system was overloaded with flight or fight or freeze, he reacted. So everything we're talking about is great. But if the kid has access to a weapon, the mind's not strong enough to overcome all the things that are going to happen. As I feel.
Yeah. I know. I sat down with my kids, and me and my wife were talking to them about this because they heard us talking about it in the shop, Friday afternoon when they came by after they got out of school. And, I explained to them, look, this kid did a lot of stuff that was really stupid. The people that were acting out were being stupid as well, destroying private property and, trying to be dumbasses. But either way, I told them, look, he's a child legally. He had no reason to have this firearm, and he had no reason to be there trying to do law enforcement's job. I said, he wasn't at home, and these people breaking into his house or breaking into his car with him in it. He went somewhere else to do this. And I said, there's a lot of failures on this because he'll pay for this for the rest of his life. And he'll have to carry the emotional damage that he did mentally to himself. Lives. I was like, that's not something you take easily. That never goes away. And I think, my kids have been raised in the industry. They've heard these conversations with adults since they were little. But it's still, even though they've done that, I wanted to make it really clear what we were talking about was not to be taken lightly. That this was a whole lot of really bad stuff that happened that shouldn't have, but it did, and the consequences are going to be immense for this young man who made a really poor set of decisions to start with. So I wanted to hammer that home to them. And my wife, she backed me up 100%. I think coming from mom and dad, it has more effect. And, you got busted up households nowadays that are far more common where one parent is missing. Maybe one parent's there and it's checked out, so, emotionally to the raising their child. There's a lot of stuff that could go wrong that doesn't give emotional balance to understand the consequences of taking a human life or pursuing an action that might result in that.
And now you have too many police officers saying this kid's a hero, which is sending a mixed message.
Exactly.
And that is going to be a downfall where some cops are so frustrated or they're so politically scarred or whatever the reason is. They're speaking and saying things that have long-reaching effects. And you're making this kid into some kind of vigilante hero, a superhero that's going to have a TV show or a sitcom, and it's wrong. This is a problem that is it's self-feeding itself. It's like out of control cancer right now because everyone's getting involved without thinking about the repercussions. And that's why I blame the police for not setting the example from right the moment something happens. You can always escalate things. You can't always de-escalate things. So their problem is they did not take action right away. That would be unheard of in the environment I was a policeman in. When something happened, you take action, or you have to explain why, or maybe you're not suited for the job.
Right.
It's that simple. And it goes back to that. Too many people are voicing yes and no, and it's confusing the message. And now what's going to happen is they're going to go to court, and then there'll be fights depending on how the outcome of court comes.
Yeah.
It's a no-win situation for everyone.
One other thing too that kind of came to mind in the last podcast that you guys did, Eric, talking about people that have that go-to move, and then as soon as they don't have that, they're broken, they don't have anything else to go to. That kind of applies with this kid too. He was not prepared in any way mentally or physically for what he was getting himself into, and his only defense, he had his only go-to card was that rifle. He had no thought process or ability for verbal de-escalation. He had no training in throwing people off, manipulating the body so that he can gain control of a situation, try to get away from it using the least necessary force. And that's one thing too for anybody in general, they should know and be mindful of is, don't have one really good move.
Yeah.
That's like your best move.
Don't be the one.
Have a nice butter spread across the board.
He went from condition white to condition black. I'm surprised he didn't start speaking Spanish. That's what it was. He went outside of his known environment, and all I could think of was pull the trigger.
Yeah.
That's it.
And part of that too, like the mindset there, that may have been what he was so transfixed on doing that once it reached a point where, like you said, he was overwhelmed emotionally with what was happening because he wasn't prepared for it, he wasn't trained for it, he wasn't conditioned for it, and go to gun was already in his hand, so go to trigger was the next step. And so you're seeing the aftermath of that one trick pony. That's all he had. Like the first order of police is presence. That usually de-escalates a lot of idiots when the cops show up, right? When you guys show up to a bar, that was the first thing that happened. People started acting better, didn't they? I mean, that's the first thing is police presence. That's the first level. And, that goes on with your training that is presented every aspect, whether it's law enforcement, military, private contractor, private security, all of these things, different levels of training. It had zero. He had the one trick pony. He had the rifle. That's his. What do you call what is it? Like his sacred object that he had that's going to provide that force field from bad things happening. And now he had a team that'll knock him over in a parking lot at night. So yeah, he blacked out. He went to condition, and the gun went boom. And the pedophile now had an additional orifice in his head. Whether that's a big loss to the community or not, I'm not going to get involved in that one. But either way, that was his one trick, and probably didn't result in what he was hoping for when that snap. Oh, I just shot this dude. You see that panic on him, gets up off the ground and gets on his phone. There's clear.
And you have to wonder where those other three bullets went too.
Yeah. Where did they go? What did they strike?
Yep.
There's, all kinds of just things just not good. Yeah, just not good in any aspect.
I know they did hit the guy. It was one was in the groin area, chest, and then shoulder, I think. But those rounds very easily can go through and through. So there's no telling. Luckily there was, as far as I know, there weren't any other reports of anybody killed in that immediate area. So thankfully, hopefully nothing hit anybody. But just property damage alone. If you're sitting in your living room and a bullet flies through your window, that's not exactly a good thing to have going on.
Oh, you live in Chicago, right?
Well, then it's just kind of expected, I guess.
It's a normal Friday. Yeah.
Yeah. Closing remarks. Marty, start with you.
It's a mess. We're at a point now where I think the inmates are running the asylum everywhere. Police aren't doing their job. Everything's political. Everything's divided, and it's not good. And it's only going to get worse because everyone is just about for themselves. It's no longer the United States. It's kind of like the divided states. And the police aren't doing what they're supposed to do. The police are trying to do what they're supposed to do. They're not getting back from this the support from the people. They're saying that Black Lives Matter, this life matters. We're so compartmentalized, and everyone's out for themselves that it's not what it used to be. It used to be when I would arrest someone, the parents would say, "Hey, take my kid because I know you're not going to treat him bad because your reputation. He did wrong. It's not my kid didn't do this." And it's just a whole mindset where now you yell at the teacher when the kid fails in school. So until that changes, and it's not changing with the current political environment, it's causing more strife everywhere else. And you can't defund police. You can't cancel their budgets. You can move money around, but you're asking cops to do so much now that it's a point now where I don't know why I don't even think you even hire them anymore because no one wants to put themselves in that kind of trick box.
Yeah.
So simply, it's a bad situation that's getting worse because there's no calming voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the podcast. I'm afraid that at this point our recording software for my guest's audio stopped working, and so I lost the bulk of the closing statements, but and there's no way for me to get that back. So hopefully you were listening live. If not, it's kind of lost the time. But I will be putting their information for Marty Katz's book, Beyond the Uniform, as well as Eric Galloway's website, Galloway Precision, where you can get all of your handgun needs as far as upgrades, trigger kits, and spring kits and stuff like that to make your firearms a little bit more sharp and better. So be sure to check their stuff out. Links in the description, and thank you for listening. All right. Coming up next, we go off the rails as we talk about random topics and just have fun. Those listening on YouTube, our discussion ends here, but check out the link in the description and join our Discord for our full show and other great discussions on the forums. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having the discussion.